What happens when you meet your father for the first time after 27 years and drive? Phil stops the tape, breaks protocol, and changes everything. Stop. Stop the cameras. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. The entire production froze. Camera operators lowered their equipment. The audience held their breath. On stage, a young woman named Sarah stood paralyzed, staring at a door that was about to open and change her life forever. What happened in the next 60 seconds would become one of the most powerful moments in the show's 21-year history. Sarah Mitchell was 27 years old. She had never met her biological father. Not once. Not even a photograph. He had left when her mother was 3 months pregnant, and for nearly 3 decades, he had been nothing more than a ghost, a name on a birth certificate, a question mark in every family tree assignment, an empty chair at every graduation and birthday. But 3 weeks ago, Sarah had received a message through the show's production team. Her father had seen her story online. He wanted to meet her. He wanted to explain. He wanted a chance. Dr. Phil had spent 2 hours with Sarah before filming began, preparing her for this moment. "You don't have to do this," he had told her in the green room. "If at any point you want to stop, we stop. This is your story, Sarah. You're in control." She had nodded, tears already forming. "I need to know why. I've needed to know my whole life." But nobody in that studio, not Sarah, not Dr. Phil, not the 200 audience members, was prepared for what was about to unfold. The episode had started normally. Dr. Phil introduced Sarah's story to the audience. She sat in the guest chair, hands trembling, as she recounted her childhood, the birthdays without a card, the father-daughter dances she skipped, the wedding where her uncle walked her down the aisle instead. "Every girl deserves to know her father loved her," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I just wanted to know if he ever thought about me. Even once." The audience was already reaching for tissues. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his trademark intensity focused entirely on Sarah. "Sarah, I want you to know something before we go any further," he said. "What you're feeling right now, that emptiness, that anger, that desperate need for answers, that's completely valid. You have every right to those feelings." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "But I also want to prepare you," Dr. Phil continued. "Sometimes the answers we get aren't the ones we hoped for. And sometimes—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes people surprise us in ways we never expected." That's when the energy in the room shifted. Dr. Phil glanced toward the wings, where a producer stood holding a clipboard. They exchanged a look, one of those silent communications that happens between people who've worked together for decades. "Sarah," Dr. Phil said slowly, "your father is here. He's backstage right now. He flew in from Portland yesterday. He's been in a hotel room preparing for this moment just like you have." Sarah's breath caught. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "But before we bring him out," Dr. Phil said, standing up, "I need to tell you something that I learned during my pre-interview with him. Something that changes the context of everything you've believed for 27 years. The studio went absolutely silent. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn manila envelope. "Your father has been carrying this envelope for 27 years, he said, holding it up for Sarah and the cameras to see. "Inside are 324 letters. One for every month of your life. He wrote them but never sent them because he was told, incorrectly, that your mother didn't want him in your life." Sarah's face went from confusion to shock to something that looked like pain and hope mixed together. "He what?" she whispered. "Dr. Phil sat down on the edge of the stage, breaking every protocol in television production. He was no longer the host. He was a human being watching another human being's world shatter and rebuild itself simultaneously. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil said suddenly, looking directly at the control booth. "Stop it right now." The red recording lights on the cameras dimmed. The studio fell into an eerie quiet, the kind of silence that only happens when 200 people collectively hold their breath. Dr. Phil turned to Sarah, ignoring the cameras entirely. Before we go any further, I need you to hear me. Not Dr. Phil, the host. Me, Phil McGraw, a father who loves his own kids more than life itself. Sarah nodded, tears streaming freely now. What I'm about to do breaks every rule we have on this show, he said. But I don't care. Because some moments are more important than television. He gestured toward the wings. Your father is back there. He's terrified. He's been awake for 3 days straight. He's convinced you're going to hate him, that this meeting will destroy any chance of a relationship. I don't know what I feel, Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Then let's figure it out together, Dr. Phil said. But we do it on your terms. Not mine. Not the show's. Yours. He stood up and addressed the audience directly, another break from protocol. I need everyone in this room to understand something. We're not here for entertainment. We're here because a young woman deserves to meet her father, and a father deserves a chance to explain a mistake that has haunted him for 27 years. The audience nodded, many already crying. Dr. Phil turned back to Sarah. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring your father out. He's going to walk to that chair. He pointed to the empty seat next to Sarah. And then I'm going to leave. I'm going to take the cameras, the crew, everyone except one handheld camera operator who will stay in the corner. You two need to talk without an audience first. You'd do that? Sarah asked, stunned. Sarah, I'd shut down production entirely if that's what you needed, Dr. Phil said with absolute sincerity. This is your moment. Not mine. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil walked to the stage door himself, another protocol break. He knocked twice, then opened it. A man stepped out. Thomas Mitchell. 54 years old. Gray hair, weathered face, wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans. He was clutching that manila envelope like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The moment their eyes met, time stopped. Sarah stood up involuntarily. Thomas froze in the doorway. Neither of them moved for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 seconds. Sarah, Thomas said, his voice breaking on her name. Just her name. Nothing else. Because what else was there to say after 27 years? Dr. Phil did something remarkable. He signaled the cameras to stop recording, truly stop, not just pretend for drama. The red lights went completely dark. He then gestured for the audience to stand and quietly leave through the side exits. We'll give you the room, he said softly to Sarah and Thomas. Take all the time you need. What happened next? Only 3 people witnessed, Sarah, Thomas, and one camera operator who stayed at Dr. Phil's insistence because he knew Sarah might want this moment preserved. Thomas walked slowly to the chair but didn't sit. He stood there, holding that envelope, trying to find words that had been waiting 27 years to be spoken. I don't expect you to forgive me, he began, his voice shaking. I don't deserve forgiveness. I abandoned you before you were even born. Why? Sarah's question was simple but carried the weight of nearly 3 decades of pain. Thomas closed his eyes. When he opened them, tears were flowing freely. Because I was 22 years old and terrified. Your mother and I had only been dating 6 months. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I told her I wasn't ready to be a father. So you just left? I was going to come back, Thomas said desperately. I swear to you, I was going to come back. I left for 2 weeks to clear my head. When I came back, your mother's parents told me she didn't want to see me. They said she decided to raise you alone, that my presence would only make things harder. Sarah's breath hitched. And you believed them? I was young and stupid and scared, Thomas said, finally sitting down because his legs couldn't hold him anymore. But here's the part that kills me. I believed them, but I still couldn't let go. He held up the envelope. His hands were shaking so badly the papers inside rustled. I wrote you a letter every month for 27 years, he said. On the 15th of every month, your birthday, I wrote you a letter telling you what was happening in my life, asking about yours, telling you that I loved you even though I'd never met you. Sarah stared at the envelope like it might explode. Why didn't you send them? She asked. Because I was told you didn't want them, Thomas said. Your grandparents said your mother had moved on, that you had a good life, and that disrupting it would be selfish. So why now? Sarah demanded, anger finally breaking through the shock. Why after 27 years do you suddenly want to meet me? Thomas pulled out his phone and showed her a Facebook post. It was Sarah's story, the one she'd shared 6 months ago about growing up without a father. I saw this, he said, and I realized your mother's parents had lied to both of us. You did want to know me. You had been searching for answers just like I'd been holding on to these letters. He paused, gathering courage. I called your mother that same day. First time we'd spoken in 26 years. And she told me the truth. Her parents had pushed me away without her knowledge. She'd spent years thinking I'd abandoned you by choice when really, I'd been kept away. Sarah's world was rewriting itself in real time. The villain of her childhood wasn't a villain at all. He was a victim of circumstance, of well-meaning grandparents who made a terrible decision. Can I? Thomas gestured toward the envelope. Can I give you these? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Thomas stood and handed her the envelope. Their fingers touched for the first time ever, father and daughter, strangers and family simultaneously. Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All addressed to my daughter Sarah, in careful handwriting that got progressively more mature over the years. She pulled out the first one. It was dated exactly 27 years ago, postmarked 2 weeks after her birth. Dear Sarah, she read aloud, voice cracking. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that I think about you every single day. I held you once, in the hospital, for 5 minutes before everything fell apart. You had the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen. I love you. I don't have the right to say that, but I do. Your father. Sarah looked up at Thomas, and something broke open in both of them. You held me? She whispered. I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that. For 5 minutes, Thomas said, tears streaming down his face. It was the best 5 minutes of my life and the beginning of the worst 27 years. They stared at each other across 3 feet of space that felt like miles. And then Sarah did something nobody expected. She stood up, walked over to Thomas, and hugged him. Not a polite hug. A desperate, sobbing, 27 years in the making hug. The single camera operator in the corner kept filming, tears running down his face behind the viewfinder. 20 minutes later, Dr. Phil quietly returned to the studio. Sarah and Thomas were sitting side by side, going through letters together, laughing and crying simultaneously. How are we doing? Dr. Phil asked gently. Sarah looked up at him with red, puffy eyes and the biggest smile. We're okay. We're really okay. Dr. Phil nodded, professional composure barely concealing his own emotion. Thomas, can I ask you something? Anything. What was the hardest letter to write? Thomas didn't hesitate. Her 18th birthday. I wrote about how I imagined her graduating high school, applying to colleges, becoming an adult. I wrote about all the moments I'd missed, and how much I wanted to be at her graduation. And then I sealed it, and added it to the pile knowing I'd probably never give it to her. But you kept writing, Dr. Phil observed. Every month, Thomas confirmed. Because even if she never read them, I needed to keep that connection alive. Those letters were the only relationship I had with my daughter. Dr. Phil turned to Sarah. Have you decided what you want to do moving forward? Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Sarah took a deep breath. I want to know him. I want to read every single one of these letters. I want to hear about his life, tell him about mine. I want. She turned to Thomas. I want my dad. Thomas broke down completely. Dr. Phil let the moment breathe, let the reality of those words. I want my dad. Settle into the room. Thomas, Dr. Phil said finally, I've been doing this show for 21 years. I've seen thousands of reunions, hundreds of families trying to heal. And I can tell you right now that what happened here today is rare. Most people don't get this chance. Most people live their whole lives with questions that never get answered. I know, Thomas said, gripping Sarah's hand. I know how lucky I am. You're not lucky, Dr. Phil corrected. You're dedicated. You wrote 324 letters to a daughter you never met. That's not luck. That's love. He turned to the camera and addressed the home audience directly. How many relationships in your life are broken because of miscommunication? How many people are you not talking to because of assumptions? The audience, which had quietly filtered back in during the reunion, nodded in agreement. Sarah Thomas, Dr. Phil said, I'm going to connect you with a family therapist who specializes in reunification. This is the beginning of your journey, not the end. There will be hard conversations ahead. There will be moments where the pain of the lost years overwhelms the joy of the found relationship. But you don't have to do it alone. Thank you, Sarah said sincerely. For everything. For stopping the cameras. For giving us privacy. For treating this like it mattered. It does matter, Dr. Phil said with absolute conviction. You matter. Your story matters. And somewhere out there, someone watching this is going to find the courage to reach out to their own estranged parent or child because they saw you do it. In the weeks following the episode, Sarah and Thomas met 6 more times. They read through all 324 letters together. The manila envelopes sat on Sarah's bookshelf, empty now, but kept as a reminder that some love persists even in absence. And that sometimes, all it takes is one brave question. Can I meet my father? To change everything. Dr. Phil later reflected. That moment when I stopped production, that wasn't about television. That was about humanity. Some moments are too sacred for an audience. The lesson was profound. Truth matters. Communication matters. And love, real, persistent, imperfect love, has the power to survive anything, even decades of separation. Sarah Mitchell got her father back. Thomas Mitchell got his daughter. And the world got a reminder that it's never too late to heal what was broken.